Hey everybody, so here's another installment of Mr. McBroom. If you remember last time, he was telling us about the winds that blew through the prairie, and one wind that had blown, and they were all in the house, and to keep the doors from opening, they put his wife's biscuits up against them because they were so heavy. And he's worried about his topsoil. He's worried that the topsoil where you plant is going to blow away. So he's about to open the door to see what happens. We all took a deep breath, and I opened the door a crack. Hardly a leaf now stirred on the ground. A bird began to twitter. I rushed outside to our poor 1-acre farm. Mercy! What I saw left me pop-eyed. "Melissa!" I shouted with glee. "Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and little Cloretta, come here, my lambs, look!" We all gazed in wonder. Our topsoil was still every bit there. Bless those youngsters. The boys had left their marbles all over the fields, and the marbles had grown as large as boulders. There they sat, huge and sparkling glasses, holding down our precious topsoil. But that rambunctious wind didn't leave us empty-handed. It ripped off our new shingled roof and pulled out the nails too. We found out later that the wind had shingled every gopher hole in the next county. Now that was a strong draft, but it wasn't a big wind, nothing like the kind that broke my leg. Still, that prairie gust was an education to me. "Young'uns," I said, after we'd rolled those giant marbles down the hill, "the next uninvited breeze that comes along we'll be ready for. There are two sides to every flapjack. It appears to me that wind can be downright useful to our farm if we let it know who's boss." The next gusty day that came along, we put in to work for us. I made a wind plow. Remember a plow? We talked about how an oxen plows, and it has that little machine, and he takes it down, and it makes the grooves in the earth. So he's made a wind plow, and Kamaya's going to like this because the ox is not going to have to do it. I think it's going to be the wind instead of the ox. I made a wind plow. I rigged a bed sheet and tackled it to our old farm plow. Soon as a breeze sprang up, I'd go tacking to and fro from the farm, plowing as I went. Our son Chester once plowed the entire farm in under 3 minutes. On Thanksgiving morning, Mama told the girls to pluck a large turkey for dinner. They didn't much like that chore, but when a prairie gust arrived just in time, the girls stuck the turkey out the window in the wind, plucked the turkey clean, pine feathers and all. Oh, and we got downright glad to see a blow come along. The young'uns were always wanting to go out and play in the wind, but Mama was afraid they'd be carried off, so I made them wind shoes. That sounds like fun. Made 'em out of a heavy iron skillet. Out in the breeze, those shoes felt like feathers. The girls would jump rope with the clothesline, and the wind spun the rope all the way around, of course. Many a time I saw the youngsters put on their wind shoes and go clumping outside with a big tin funnel, all the empty bottles and jugs they could round up. They'd cork the containers jammed full of prairie wind. Then comes summer, when there wasn't a breath of air. They'd uncork a bottle or two of fresh winter air and enjoy the cool breeze. Of course, we had to windproof the farm every fall. We'd plant the fields of buttercups. My, they were slippery, all that butter. Now, are buttercups really made of butter? No, they're flowers. They're little pretty yellow flowers, so that's another non-literal language. The wind would slip and slide all over the farm without being able to get a purchase of the topsoil. By the end, the boys and I re-shingled the roof, and we'd use screws instead of nails. Mercy me, then came the biggest wind. It started out gentle enough. There were a few jackrabbits and some crows flying backwards through the air. Nothing out of the ordinary. Of course, the girls went outside to jump the clothesline, and the boys got busy laying up bottles and winds for summer. Mama had just baked a batch of fresh biscuits. My, did they smell good. I ate a dozen or so out of the oven, and that turned out to be a terrible mistake. Outside, the wind was picking up ground speed and scattering fence posts as it went. Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and the little Clorida, I shouted. Inside, my lambs, the wind is getting ornery. The young'uns came a-trooping in and pulled off their wind shoes, and not a moment too soon. The clothesline began to whip around so fast that it seemed to disappear. Then we saw a hen house come flying through the air with the hens still in it. The sky was turning dark and mean, and the wind came out of the far north, howling and shrieking and shaking the house. In the cupboard, cups chattered in their saucers. Soon we noticed big balls of fur rolling along the prairie like tumbleweeds. Turned out they were timber wolves up from the north. And then an old hollow log came spinning across the farm and split against my chomping stump. It's a hard word to say. Out rolled a black bear, and he was in a temper. He had been trying to hibernate and didn't take kindly to being awakened. He gave out a roar and looked around for somebody to chase. When he saw us at the window, he decided we would do. The mere sight of him scared the young'uns, and they huddled together, holding hands near the fireplace. I got down my shotgun and opened a window. That must have been a mistake. Two things happened at once. The bear was coming on, and in my haste I forgot to calculate the direction of the wind. It came shrieking along the inside of the house, and when I poked the gun barrel out the window, well, the wind beat it at an angle of an iron. The buckshot flew down south, and I found out later that it brought down a brace of ducks over Mexico. There they are. But worse than that, when I threw up open the window, such a draft came in that my young'uns were sucked up through the chimney. Holding hands, they were carried away like a string of sausages. Mama nearly fainted. My dear Melissa, I exclaimed, don't you worry, I'll get those young'uns back. I fetched a rope and rushed outside. I could see the young'uns up the sky, below and south. I could also see the bear, and he could see me, and he gave a growl with a mouthful of tea like rusty nails. He rose up on his hind legs and came towards me with his eyes just glowing red as fire. I didn't fancy tangling with that monster, so I dodged around, and behind the clothesline I kept one eye on the bear and the other on the young'uns. They were now flying over the county seat, and looked hardly bigger than the mayflies. The bear charged towards me, and the wind was spinning the clothesline so fast that he couldn't even see it, and he charged smack dab into it. My, didn't he begin to jump? He jumped red hot pepper, only faster. He had just got himself trapped inside the rope and couldn't get out. Of course, I didn't lose momentum. I began flapping my arms like a bird, and that was such an enormous big wind I figured I could fly right after the young'uns. The wind tugged and pulled at me, and it couldn't lift me an inch off the ground. What in tarnation? I hadn't eaten too many biscuits. So remember how the biscuits were so heavy last time they kept the door closed? So he ate so many biscuits, they're holding him down, which is also not true. Those young'uns were almost out of sight. I rushed to the barn for a wind plow. Once out in the breeze, the bed sheet filled with wind, and off I shot like a cannonball, plowing a deep furrow as I went. Didn't I streak along, though? I was making better time than the young'uns. I kept my hands on the plow and the handles and stirred around barns and the farmhouses, and I saw haystacks exploded in the wind. If that wind got any stronger, it wouldn't surprise me to see the sun blown off course. It would set in the south at high noon. I plowed right along and gained rapidly on the young'uns. They were still holding hands and just clearing the treetops. Before long, I was within hailing distance. Be brave, my lambs, I shouted. Hold tight. I spun after them until their shadow lay across my path. but the bedsheet was so swelled out with wind that I couldn't stop the plow. Before I could let go of the handles and jump off, I sailed far ahead of the young'uns. So here he is. Can y'all see that? So crazy. I've heaved the rope in the air. Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and little Cloretta shouted, "Hang on!" Hester missed the rope, and Jill missed the rope, and so did Peter. But Will caught it, and I had to dig my heels in the earth to hold him down. Then I started back. The young'uns were too tight for the wind. They hung in the air, and I had to drag them home on the rope like a balloon's on a string. Of course, it took most of the day to shoulder my way back through the wind, and it was a mighty struggle, I tell you. It was near supper time when we saw our farmhouse ahead, and the black bear was still jumping rope. I dragged the young'uns into the house, those rascals. They had a jolly time flying around the air and wanted to do it again. Mama put 'em to bed with their wind shoes on and everything. The wind blew all night, and the next morning that bear was still jumping rope, his tongue hanging out. He had lost so much weight he was skin and bones. Finally, about mid-morning, the wind got tired of blowing one way, so it blew the other, and we got feeling sorry for that bear, so we cut him loose. He was so tuckered out he didn't even growl. He just pointed himself towards the tall timber to find another hollow log to crawl in. But he had lost the fine art of walking, and we watched him jump, 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 jump north until he was out of sight. That was a howling, scowling, almighty big wind that broke my leg. It had not only pulled up fence posts, but the holes as well. It dropped one of those holes right outside the barn door, and, well, I stepped in it. That's the bottom truth. Everyone on the prairie knows Josh McBroom would rather break his leg than to tell a fib. One more chapter.